Hi and welcome back to our third session for today. Today concludes the entire self-kindness weekend. So we've had 8 amazing sessions, and today's topic is rekindling the marital intimacy. Hell, we've drifted since the kids came along, and I think that's something that a lot families experience, and yet we don't talk about it, even to my friends, because sometimes I may not be comfortable and I may not want their advice or their judgment. Yeah, but let's talk about it today. So if you have any questions, please key them in as I introduce my wonderful panelists. I'm very happy because this is a session where I know each of them, right? So let's start with Mark. Mark is a counselor with the social factor, and that's just one of the many work you do. You're also a lecturer, right? So relationship is something that he will provide the male perspective on. And then Dr. Angela, she's not just a doctor by profession, but she also has a passionate interest in intimacy, like sex and intimacy coaching, relationship. So we'll hear a lot from you. And then Andrea, she has her own following in the Athena Rising, our intimacy coach, and she talks about very taboo topics, you know, so daring to put herself out there is something that I think is very commendable. You all should know me by now, Junior, the founder of Mom Space. So let's get started, with this panel session. Do type in your questions. Okay, I think the reality is many marriages takes a backseat when the baby comes, because it is excitement, it's a new life. But then the thing is, this young life interrupts our lives or our intimacy, our connection, our relationship. So I want to start with Mark. Yeah, from couplehood to parenthood, the entire world shifts, right? So wait, I'm just looking through. So initially, right, it was a honeymoon period, and then now we have a nuclear family. So any theories that you can share, with regards to the transition?
Junior, I think it's very interesting what you said earlier on, that you said the child interrupts the marital relationship, and that's actually quite it's quite if you look at it, it's like a negative perspective to look at it, because if you see something that interrupts it, then you see it as something that it could be negative. But if you see it as part of the entire marital family experience, so that I think is a very different approach to looking at it. So I mean, you were asking about theories. Yeah, there are a whole host of theories, but I think one of the ones I was going to talk about is the life cycles, family life cycles theory. So you have the honeymoon stage, as you mentioned, and then the early marriage, and then middle marriage, and the later part of marriage. It's all to do with the number of years that you are married, and then with the associated issues, and certain issues, if you don't deal with them in the earlier stages, when it goes to the later stage of the marriage, you have issues. For example, things like understanding each other, understanding family backgrounds, family of origin backgrounds, understanding your personalities and practices. So I think it's all part of this. A whole lot of theories, of course. Many people know of them in a practical manner, but the theories explain what people experience on a day-to-day basis.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really our perspective, because in just my words, in languaging it does give an insight about how my attitude about the entire change is. So Angela, I want to ask you, physically, the woman's body undergoes the most changes. For the man, nothing much has changed. But for the woman, it's, from like womb to like gone, and and then the breast now has milk. So with regards to that, right, do you want to share about what, so my whole body has changed, right? If you can just share a bit of what the woman is going through.
Well, I mean, in different stages post-delivery, there's a lot of things that's happening. Like right after delivery, your body is so tired up. Some of us struggle with breastfeeding, and breastfeeding actually takes a toll on new mothers. You probably realize that your newborn is going to attach to you 24/7. So in the textbook, they always say they only need about 8 times the milk a day. That is totally not true. They are like on your breast 24/7. So you feel so maxed out and so touched out. And then there you are for 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, I'm sorry to say, but you're bleeding like almost non-stop. I mean, like you're oozing here and then you're bleeding there. You really have no mood for any form of intimacy.
Yes.
Because you're struggling as a new mother. And I guess we can't leave that completely out of the picture. They too feel quite helpless about this thing that's in front of them that's so squirmish and crying all the time and only wants mommy's milk and nothing else. So I guess that really put new couples, new parents in a pretty helpless situation. And with that, there's really not much space and time to talk about intimacy. But what I really, really want to kind of reinforce here is that, yes, we might not have time for sex per se, but the actual care that the parents has for each other in this time when they're struggling is actually the best time to build intimacy in another form, emotional intimacy. Because intimacy is not just about sex, it's about how do you support each other. And it's this time when we are vulnerable, we are struggling, it's about how do we come together as new parents to make the relationship work. I think that is the start of how to build intimacy with a new kid.
I love where you share where intimacy is not just physical, but it includes the emotional connection. And I mean, viewers, I'm sure you all would know, right? The baby doesn't just latch on for milk. As a comfort, right? It's really just for comfort. And then that's why fathers, in case you didn't know when Angela was sharing, it's really 24/7 because, and just to fall asleep, it's comfort. It's not just suckling for milk, right? So thank you. And Andrea?
Yeah, I was going to jump in there. It's quite interesting because you said that the female body changes, but not the male. Actually, research shows that there's some like hormones that are in the father when the man becomes a father that actually lets the man be more try to say feel a desire to love the child more. So that's an interesting during the initial period of time. So actually that helps. And if you're talking about supporting your spouse during the birth and the period of time, I think what's very important is to take on the role as well. Of course, males you can't give the milk, but you could take, let's say, the earlier stages. So what I did was I took the 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. shift, and so to allow my wife to sleep through the later part of it. So the sleep
That's
cycle,
nice.
so that actually helps. So
Exactly. That's very nice initiative. My husband didn't do anything. And I had to literally, and I didn't even realize because, being a mom, I think it's my job, right? I mean, that's the natural thing. So I didn't even say anything until as I talk to friends, they're like, hey, my husband also can help out. You just pump out and ask your husband. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option. So that I told him, hey, can you help out with the night feeds? Of course. When I woke him up, scold me vulgarities, because he was so used to sleeping through the night. So even though he had good intentions, I think there was really a period of transition for him and for me. I'm also like, ask you for help. You say, okay, wake you up, kind of scolded. And then, but for him, I understood. And today, he's so much more a hands-on father. But it really took us, like mom and dad, like evolving into that new position.
Yes.
It's not like we knew anything, right?
I mean, the funny thing I've realized in the earlier part is that a happy wife means a happier life.
Smart man.
End conclusion.
Yeah, actually that's true. The earlier the man finds it out, right? And then happy wife, happy life, and then the entire family as well. And Andrea, you talk about intimacy, right? And just now Angela was talking about communication. Is there something that you want to share? Because I think men and women communicate very differently.
I think what men and women, whether it's men and women, first kid, second kid, I think what we need to realize is that when you have a child, it is a change in your situation, right? Or you have a new child, it's a change in your situation. How change reacts on the human nervous system and our ability to then feel sexual arousal, sexual desire, the impact is different per person. In fact, in a couple, I can guarantee no two people will react the same way. So often when one person maybe feels that sex is really important, right? But with this new kid, I'm like completely lost. With another person, maybe almost like the adrenaline or the uncertainty of it all is like, wow, this is, new life, like, wow, I want to get it on because, I'm feeling so much more love for my spouse. I don't know, because between two different people, there's usually that difference. And that's when we need to be able to communicate what we are experiencing in the change to our sex life, our sexual arousal, our sexual desire. Be able to do that between a couple without, in a way, blaming or projecting on each other. It's because of you, that's why like that, in that sense. But being able to say that in a really safe space, I'm experiencing this change, I'm not really sure why. I feel that from arousal, I'm going to need a little bit more time. Or I feel like my desire is dipping in the morning, but actually around this time of the day, I'm actually quite okay. That kind of thing. So like that kind of conversation, it sounds very
Technical.
Yeah, it sounds very technical.
Yes.
But I kind of feel like we don't even talk about it. It doesn't just happen. It's not I want, then it happens, you know. And that's the thing that couples need to realize. It's not like I touch you means like some, or like I just, you know, like, and that's the very interesting thing, because when I work with couples, there can be one person in the relationship that's like, oh, you mean that was to tell me that you
Initiate, yeah.
do initiate? I thought you just want to like
Sayang
touch
me.
sayang a bit.
Yeah.
So then this the thing is, I was like, okay, then now you know that there's a gap in that, then talk about it. So the thing is, it's not just one more new child. It is a whole change in the dynamics that they're working at. And how does change impact each person? It's very, very different. And how does change impact their sexual arousal and sexual desire? I think that's what needs to have a conversation. And that's not going to be one sitting. You know, it's not like, hey, come, we need to talk, and then you sit down. It's going to be like over a few conversations, you know, different timings, and just a gradual learning process. Oh, I didn't know that about you. Actually, I also didn't know that about myself, you know. And then you have that conversation and keep going.
I so love what you're sharing, because I think what comes to mind is parenthood is an inward discovery again. So for example, even if I thought I knew my spouse and this, right, the birth of a new child literally makes me re-look at things, myself, and how we can connect at a deeper level. Because if I am not self-aware, and I don't know why I'm upset, I'm just upset, I just don't feel like having sex. And if we don't process, how are we then to communicate and to connect with another human being? Yeah?
And of course, I just want to add, we parents are the role models of your kids. If you're struggling how to express our love for each other, right, then our kid will go like, huh? No, what is love? So the kids end up having a very confused idea how love is actually expressed.
Wonderful. I love what you share about modeling. And with that, I want to invite the screen up, because we have this screen that says men and women are so different. So I want to invite all our viewers to look at this. His Needs, Her Needs is a book by William Harley, where they say the impriority. So what they did is they really surveyed a lot of men separately, women. They gave them this list of 10 and asked them to rank which one in order of priority is true for you. What is important for you? So I just want to invite our audience to just look at our screen. So would it be true, right? So guys, guess what their priority is? Let's start from the number 5, okay? To them, admiration. They like their partner, their spouse, to admire them. I make mistake, I fail, also just admire me. And then domestic support. I want to make sure that my family is in order, that you can anchor the house. And then number 3, I want my spouse still to be attractive, give birth still, I want her to look good. And then recreational companionship, whether it's, I don't know, like gaming or watching soccer or doing something together or watching even the movies. And finally, the top on their list is sexual fulfillment. So I think this is very interesting. And viewers, if you are here, you know, just type in yes, no. Okay, and then for hers, let's see the contrast. For us, woman, the fifth, the number 5 is family commitment. What we're looking for in a male partner is that I know he's committed to this family. And then number 4, specifically how he shows it, financial support. Number 3, and in communication, I like honesty and openness. And I think this is something that a lot of moms tell me, yeah, he lied to me one time. If you are dishonest about that one thing, I don't know what else you have been hiding the truth about, right? And then number 2, conversation. Ladies, even when we go toilet, we do enjoy going together. It's just for the companionship, the conversation. And finally, affection. And I think for me, affection was, you know, when my husband massaged me, I'm like, wow, so nice. You know, I really feel, and then later, like what you said, I realized that for him, that was his way of starting a potential number 1 for him, right? And I didn't know. And then that sort of like tainted it. I was like, I thought it was a pure, no strings attached massage. You know, so I want to open it to the panel, starting with Mark, you, right? Being the only guy. Would you say this 5, you know, when you look at this, from your experience in counseling different couples, would you say this is one big reason why there are different, that there is a mismatch? Yeah.
I think it's a very interesting study that is done. And looking at the number of couples I've counseled, I mean, I counsel mainly the males. Yeah, they come to me. And I believe actually that what many of them are seeking for is respect. Yeah,
Which is admiration.
Admiration. Yes. So this idea that if my spouse does not respect me in private and in public, like saying disparaging things about me, then I will feel very frustrated about the relationship. Yeah. So so I mean, I from my perspective, I believe actually that honesty and openness is the most important. Yeah, because I think communication on both ends, communication about expectations as well. That's what I'm saying, right? And I can understand why this survey would say affection. I like this whole idea of love and respect. I think that's where I bring much of my counseling. So in many ways, women do would appreciate the love that the spouse has, and men do actually like the respect. I mean, it's not that women should not love the men and men should not respect the women, but it's just in terms of it's just a biological how we meet in a sense, right? Yeah. So that would be my response. I think sex
So
is,
number one
yeah.
is sexual fulfillment is not number one on your list.
Sex is important. It's an important part of marriage. I think a sexless marriage, I mean, firstly, that would be sad because I think marriage is I mean, it's not only for the sake of increasing our population, right? No matter what, I mean, government policies would want you to believe, but I believe living a fulfilling marriage is part of a fulfilling life, right? And sex is one important part. I think at the end of the day, it's about understanding each other, about understanding her needs, understanding his needs in that sense, and needs not in physical needs, but emotional needs as well. So that's where I'm coming from.
So what I hear for you, number 5 for the men, and number 1, and then but for you, number 3 from the woman's.
Yes,
right?
I think
Honesty and openness. That's important.
I
to you.
feel, I mean, this survey, I was wondering why honesty and openness is not as important to the male in the survey, but in the males in the survey. But I feel that should be the starting point for both sides, regardless whether you're male or female.
Wonderful, thank you, Mark. But okay, and we are coming from a very sensitive guy who actually volunteered to wake up at 4 a.m. So not the mainstream. But thank you for showing us. No, really. But thank you for showing us that there are men who are sensitive to women. So Dr. Angela, I want to ask you: can you identify which are your top 3, and do they fall in the categories as stated?
The first reaction that I get when I say this is like, you mean there are no overlaps at all?
No, of course there are, but this is, I mean, at the end, like what Mark pointed out, there are overlaps. But I think if they were to give a figure, so we didn't do this, but when I had to choose 10, obviously my number 1 wasn't affection. It's different, but my number 1, 2, and 3 fell under the hers. Interestingly, and then for guys, their number 1, 2, and 3 fall under his. That's all. So in order, I think it's definitely different for different people. Yeah.
Because I guess that's where the root of conflict is.
Yes.
When men and women don't quite understand each other's needs.
It's because it's so stuck. You see the
Correct,
difference,
correct,
right? Yeah.
correct. And then, so in my work, when I work with couples, what I do see that's missing is communication. Communication in the sense that how do you translate this differences across? It's like, if you don't do this, that means equals you don't love me. But the other person says, but this is how I love you.
The 5 love languages is
Correct,
one, right?
correct.
Yes.
So-
I could be cooking for you, and actually I don't want food. I just want you to talk to me.
So I guess there's a lot of mismatch. So in my work, what I do is actually just sit down there and, well, lack of a better word, I'm actually watching a drama serial most of the time.
Both sharing their side of the story.
Okay, and then try to piece it together. So in a way, it's better for a third person to be there. So I'm actually there to facilitate the conversation. I'm there to mediate the differences. And how do they come to a consensus of how do they actually want to be loved and cared for? What's the expression of that? And then same like what Andrea said, initiation of sex, that is so common. And then they were like, you mean that is your signal to want sex? And then it's like suddenly, they realize they've been missing each other's signals, and that's why they haven't had sex for the last 6 months.
Yes.
So I guess that's where it all comes from, communication for me.
Wonderful. So, but would your needs, right? Would they fall more under the her needs if you just were to identify the top 3?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because I do realize that in the local setting, I guess, men are like, well, more like Mark, they're getting more and more sensitive. In fact, sometimes it's the women who are getting more masculine.
True. I think today, work in dual income families, right?
Yeah.
Women are actually asserting themselves because as they work, they earn their own income. There's the independence.
So the financial dependency thing is no longer something very prominent in our local setting. In our those clients I see in the 30s, they are more or less, dual income, financially independent, have their own career. It's really how, because now the women have to juggle the home, her career and her own things. So then it's the women who are like, I really don't have time and space for you.
Yeah.
And then the guy will be at home, oh, after work I just play my computer games. Like, so the guy appear to have more space to connect than most women do actually at this point in time.
I love that. I love that perspective because I think you're so right. In just one generation, like my mom's generation, she was the homemaker.
Yeah.
Right? It was very clear. But in today's day, my husband complains, I have no time for him, right? So that's so true. And he is willing to drop things, and I'm like, but I don't have time, you know?
Actually, I was just going to just jump in there. There was a particular year, I think it was 2018. For some reason or another, I counseled in a professional as well as in a personal capacity. More than about I would say about 8 to 10 men who were going through quote unquote midlife crisis. So they were actually thinking of possibly
What crisis?
midlife
okay.
crisis. Which this time it's in the 30s and the 40s. They were actually thinking of changing a career transition, changing their jobs or going to a non-profit kind of a line.
Yep.
And actually, for the personal people, our personal context, the wives were actually quite worried about the financial aspect. So I mean that's the other aspect as well. So I mean especially when men decide to make a change and just out of information out of the 8 people who going to talk about it, ultimately only 3 change their jobs and only 1 to a completely different setting. But so it's a period of crisis that men go through. And so the husband would tell me that they find that their wives don't really understand that it's their own process of going through their own who they are as a man, being secure in finances, because to a guy, financial stability is extremely important. If I can't bring food to the table, I will feel that I'm not fulfilling my responsibilities at home. Yes.
I think I hear what I'm hearing from Angela and even from Mark, right? Is there's a shift in woman, our consciousness as we begin to step out. And that also gives men the space to begin to relook. Because in the past, if I'm not happy, I stay in the job because I need to bring home the bacon. But today, hey, my personal fulfillment becomes something that I can have the space to begin to contemplate. So wonderful. And Andrea, yeah, so I so I want to ask you, right? Like, in the difference between men and women, right? I think, like Mark has said, men likes respect because it's my ego. And you actually have this term like, woman, you want to know the way you castrate a man, do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, because we kind of spoke about this before the session, right? And I agree with with Mark as well on the whole like respect piece. And I get that a lot of times I coach individuals and I coach couples, and a lot of times when there's a lot of resentment or just some unhappiness built in the relationship, usually the knee-jerk reaction is, why do I have to feed his ego? And I think that's where we really need to understand, I'm talking heterosexual relationships, so between the man and the woman, we need to understand that men value respect. I mean, when I say value, meaning that if you are able to show your respect, genuine respect in the relationship, appreciation for how he provides, so the support piece, how he provides for the family, that to him that's genuine love and connection. It's not about feeding ego or anything, it's just about understanding this. This is his needs, I acknowledge, and I want to provide this for you, and I want to support this for you. And women have learned through the centuries and are very skilled at energetically castrating their men. And I say it with such a harsh term, right? Because it's true. They go right for their manhood. How do you attack a guy in his manhood? You attack the way he does his job, his ability to bring money to the family, and if he has kids, his ability as a father. Fastest way to attack manhood, and his ability to perform during sex. Very easy to attack guy. But the thing is, if you are there to build a connected relationship, why are you going for all the points to hit him? On the flip side, then there's the woman. The fastest way to so I'm saying this not that you know how to attack your
so that we can stop doing it if we have been
unconscious, right? Most of the time.
So it's unconscious. So when I kind of bring it out, like it gets a little bit clearer. And when I do my coaching, I don't always say it upfront, but I work at the belief system level, because for some people they don't see. If you cannot see, it means you cannot see. You're blind to it. So for women, the fastest way to attack her is her looks, her ability to parent, her ability to be sexy. So it's a bit like performance in bed, but it's more like her sexual appeal, right? Rarely do you see things like ability to do her job. I mean, that does kind of come somewhere in between, before, after
Later.
that, but there's some earlier parts with this. So it's very interesting in that interplay, but I see a lot. I wouldn't say a lot more, but I see a lot, and I kind of clinch, and I can tell you, if I say this, and guys, y'all can agree with me. How crude can I be?
Let's just be authentic. Yeah.
I swear, women and wives have found such a, like, when they're in their resentment and their anger, they found such a way to just criticize their man. His balls can shrink back in his body, like they can do that. But what's the point of having this type of power, right? Because it completely goes against all the things you want to connect, sexual connection, intimacy, openness and honesty. It goes against every single thing that you want to build. But the other thing that I noticed about the differences with his and her needs, or rather like the different phrases that showed up in the 1 to 5, right? It's very interesting that it's different, but if you look at each couple, how they try to relate to each other, for instance, like for the men, like the support, like providing for the family is one of his ways of showing that, I can provide for my family. And in a way, when the woman views like affection as high, for being able to see that that's his way of showing affection, you're actually also meeting on the needs level. It's just that they're showing it kind of really differently. And of course, sexual fulfillment is on one, and then I hear a lot of wives going like, yeah lah, of course, he wants sex all the time. And when I work with couples, and sex is always usually one of the topics, sex or intimacy, I usually ask this question to each person: what does sex mean to you in your marriage? Both will come out with slightly different things. But you'll be surprised that once the other party understands that, then they'll be like, I get it why this is important to you. And then from there, you can work a different way to help the other person reach whatever they want in place of sex. Let's say if the situation at that point really doesn't allow, because you're really struggling in the first few weeks to adapt to a whole new baby, for example. So I think that's something that we need to see. Like, it's not really completely different. I actually do see how they work with each other, but it really varies from couple to couple.
I so love what you're sharing, because I think without this list and without the insights that from your counseling sessions you have brought forth, very often I think there's no intention to really hurt. It's just out of ignorance. Like for me, it's not important. For example, for you, it's respect. It's not important whether you scold me or I may not be happy, but it doesn't impact me as much as it does a guy. So. And that lack of knowledge is why I keep hurting you unconditionally, and the relationship dives. But I think with this, right, this is just one of many. I think every relationship is different. Everyone's definition or connection or association of sex, or even what I need in a relationship, is different, right? It may not just be sex. So I think we've covered communication, but now if we were to talk about sex, right? So my husband tells me, men are wired up very differently from women. And he tells me men are visual. So he said, even I can just look at a woman and it's like in their mind, in the background, it almost seems as if they constantly want sex. No communication, it's okay. Just sex is their way of communicating. From a man's perspective, or from the different men that you've counseled, is it true that?
Okay, talking about visual, just to share with you a story. Okay. I went for a relationship course once, and the speaker at that point in time talk about the hunter-gatherer societies, right? And how in that society, they will always want to look at the deer and the fire, we see and shoot, aim, fire, and kind of a thing, right? So in a sense, we need to have a moving target. So just to share, if let's say my wife were to say, dear, can you help to fold the laundry? Okay, but I might not register it at all. Okay. So what the speaker said is that if you really want your husband, okay, to know what you're doing, just walk up and down in front of him 3 times, and then you'll get his attention. So my wife really did that once. She just walked up, dear, walk up and down. Can you fold the laundry? Oh, okay. And I actually went to do it later.
And from your perspective, you actually experienced a shift when
helped.
she just audibly communicated and when she physically was in your face.
It really did help when she actually did move in front of me. I actually, okay. So yeah, it really did help. The other thing, if you do it auditory, she has to say at least 3 or 4 times, and I might still not hear. It's like, yes, the moving target actually does help me as a man. So,
Okay. And is it true that sex is something that is constantly at the back of your mind? Like,
yes
you know,
and
that
no,
physical
depends on-
connection, and for women, I mean, for us, I think a lot of us value that emotional connection. It's not to say we don't want that physical connection, but in terms of priority, and if we were to just, you know, that seems to be higher up on the list. And whereas for guys, it seems like the physical connection is what means for you. Is it true?
I think it's a yes and no thing, because yes, I mean, definitely that's an important part of it. But I believe in the physical, the emotional connection. In fact, my wife says I talk too much, which is
Okay.
unusual, because
Yes.
most women will say that the guys hardly talk at all. She says, okay, you not talk so much now. I'm tired. So, yeah, I'm a different kettle of fish, so to speak.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just add on,
Yes.
so in my experience is that some men are naturally more guarded and find it harder to express their emotions. So talking in conversations to say, you know, I love you, I care for you, you know, thank you for this and that, somehow is not their way of expression. So when it comes into the bedroom, it becomes a very convenient way to show how much I love you. Okay, because in that world, there's no need for conversations, there's no need to emote.
Except dirty talk lah, maybe.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
more sensual based. You know, at some point in time when couples get more proficient with each other, it boils down to a bit more technical as well, where guys can go like, oh, this actually works, my wife, she likes it, or this didn't quite work. So their ability to, you know, come up with solution-based approach becomes something very innovative and they get excited about in the bedroom. So it's not just like, again, jerking off the kind, but they actually figured out what actually makes their wife feel good, what pleasurizes their wife. And to them, that's like the way of telling, I love you, I want to care for you, I want to make sure that you're taken care of during this time you're together.
I love what you say, and I think sometimes it comes from the past, because I think, you know, when we've been brought up in a society where men are supposed to be strong, don't talk too much, if not that seen as girly even. I think men build their identity around that, and it's not going to change overnight or even the course of a few years until and unless they feel safe with someone. So I love what you're sharing, but I'm just wondering, right? I mean, I hear a lot of moms who say men just want sex. You know, there's still like, even though many men, I'm sure that's their way of communicating and expressing their love, the receiving end, like moms or women, right, feel that you just want my body.
I think it's the timing. It's really the timing. Like, let's say if me being a mom, then like my kid, you know, I just put her in bed. I'm like so tired after one whole day, and then suddenly say, I want sex. You go like, what? And then so with that, because humans are very impressionable creatures. When one thing happens a few too many times, it becomes all the time.
Yes.
So even though a lot of people tell me scheduling sex is totally unsexy, but I think for parents, that's the way to go. To make it like, how do you actually create a conducive environment for that to happen, and not something spontaneous all the time, because your kid is more spontaneous than you are.
Yeah, definitely. And yes, I agree that, because I think
That needs to be a
often,
meme.
right, when you actually have a schedule, I think both know, and there is that preparedness, you know, leading up to it, instead of some you know, and then I'm like, and then, you know, all the pretense comes, like I'm tired, or pretending to sleep when actually we just want to avoid something, because we are just emotionally and mentally not in the space.
On that note, I'll just say to parents to just remember to lock the doors.
Yes.
I mean, a number of kids have been traumatized, and that really affects the perception of who they are and what relationships are about.
Yes.
So that's something that I feel I have to mention.
And I think when you talk about trauma, right, it's different when a kid walks in and says something, and then we know the kid is present, compared to when the kid just watches in silence, and then we also don't know, and the kid doesn't know, and nobody knows that the kid has ever been traumatized or witnessed something.
Yes,
right?
because it's likely that he or she would then go on and act it in his or her life.
Or go and research on what just happened.
Not only research, but actually physically practice some of these things at a young age. So, or get into risky situations like that. So I mean, that's
So always lock your
spontaneity
door.
is good, but lock your doors.
But then that also reminds us sex ed is important. You don't start at sex ed after puberty. You start it like when they are
Exactly.
No,
Like
I
right now.
started like now, you
Like
know,
now,
when they're
yes.
young. I mean, when my
Yes.
son washes himself, even my kids, right?
Yes.
I told the girls, I can't remember at 5, I say, no one is supposed to see you naked, not even dad.
Oh, I
You
told
know?
my kid at
Yes.
2. So
You know, and
Yes.
then I teach them how to call their breasts, their vulva,
Yes.
the penis. No, don't call it like, you know,
Pet
whatever.
names, yeah.
Don't
No
call it
pet
pet
names,
names.
yeah.
Yeah, because then it gets them disconnected. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't call my arm that swinging thing, right? I call my arm an arm. There's an embracing of my body in its
Personhood,
entirety.
yes.
So why should some parts be seen as dirty, less than, or avoided topics, right? So wonderful.
Yeah.
And Andrea?
Yeah. No, I think the whole sex ed piece is like a whole different conversation. I feel like working with different individuals and couples, I feel that sex is at the back of, like, it isn't always just guys. It's also at the back of some women. But I think what we tend to confuse is, again, back to sexual arousal and sexual desire. So the ability to build sexual arousal for some comes after feeling the sexual desire. So I'm feeling like I want sex, and then, you know, like I go
go
from
for
there.
it, yeah.
But for some, it requires that build out the arousal before they hit the level with, oh, okay, I want sex. So it's also a bit on timing. Besides the actual practical timing, like Angela said, like, you know, how the situation is, it's also understanding how you react. That's why I say the conversation is so important around what works for you, what doesn't, and just kind of talking that out as well, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know. But the thing is, I think when it comes to parents, it comes to men and women, and then the visual cues. So I get this. I can feel, I can hear women at the background going, yeah lah, he only wants sweet young thing and everything. Okay, so you really need to understand, and people in committed relationships. I think I say this in a lot of the panels before. We need to really understand. Men really just want their spouse to be happy. They're not out to piss you off. Okay, let's establish baseline assumption level first. You know, like baseline reality first. When you talk about visual cues, right? Usually it's just basically what the eye sees, right? You know, like in terms of like, oh, you dress like that. Does it mean, like, you know, you dress in your favorite lingerie? Does it mean that it's signaling something already? You know, like that's some sort of visual cue. You know, like he likes red, okay, or he likes black. You know, you can adjust with this kind of things. The thing with visual cues is women are also very concerned with, you know, your body, you know, am I like looking this way, looking that way? So they immediately go, he's very visual. Must be he like that kind of body lah. Then I don't have how after, you know, like you're going into a lot of your own stories. So usually I go, stop, okay, like look at each person's personal stories. But one thing I've also realized is, which is quite good as well, because men's brains are not that they're not detail oriented, but they don't go like, you know, they don't look at a woman and go, I love her, you know, and then but she got like this
Cellulite.
this very weird cellulite on her thigh. They don't go this way, you know. If I love her, I love her. She's the mother of my children. She's the mother. Like there's this whole thing, you know. But women will be like, yeah, you know, I managed to like clean myself out quite nicely today. You know, finally the baby's sleeping already, but I got cellulite, which is really very interesting, because both are focusing on completely different. Which is why I say always start with the baseline. Your guy is not there to piss you off. He really, really just wants to make you happy.
And I love when you share that, when you debunk that myth, because I think for many guys, it's when I feel I cannot please you because of the signals that you've been sending me, or the attacks that you've been unconsciously making, that then maybe I go out. So I think I may not. So I think sometimes, right, the media that we see has all the affairs, and sometimes it does seep into our mind insidiously and plant stories that we begin to suspect when we don't need to. When actually all we need to know, right, is, am I committed to making this partner of mine feel good in their language? If it's respect, you know, how do I speak their language, and how do I communicate likewise, not just for you, but even for me, that, hey, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, can we, you know, not today, or can you give me a massage, you know? And in that two-way communication is where we find that common ground, instead of not having communication, and then the wall that builds become wider and wider and wider, and after a while the relationship really ends, you know, in something that is not too nice. I mean, I'm saying, when I say that, two persons may even be married now and unhappy for the rest of the 20-30 years in the family, you know. It's not about a divorce or not, you know. And then we model relationship as that for our children.
Yes. That's very sad, because I mean, I see that in some of the clients. I mean, they respond that way to their spouses because that's how their parents That's parents' relationship was not very happy either. And it's just utilitarian, and also a number of couples who choose to go their own separate ways after what the term is launching a center. After the kids are independent, and then they say, okay, let's call it quits. So, or even let's just live in separate places in the world, and we don't have to be divorced, but we just not together. Yeah, so that's sad. The other thing that I was going to talk about is expectations. I think that's what you mentioned. I think that's really, really important for both his needs and her needs. I think it's about expectations of the other partner. So,
yeah, wonderful. I love what you're saying, because I think we are in this new era where it's really no more about like what you're saying, I'm staying together for the sake of the kids. And then we heap it on the kids, we make the kids feel responsible for our failed relationship or working through our relationship. And I think that's never fair to the child. Yeah. Okay. So moving this conversation on to parenting styles, right? Because I think sometimes it's not just intimacy between a couple, but let's say we disagree on how to parent, right? Where our child is the focus of our attention, but just different parenting styles. And then because we're so attached to our style that we begin to, disagree. So Mark, I want to ask you, you talk about change system theory, and how one individual says, I want to change, it's a good, while the theory is true, the truth is most often neither wants to budge. I'm waiting for you to see what you will do. Yeah, so anything that you can speak on that.
So then the question I'll ask is, what do you hope out of the relationship, right? What do you hope out of the family situation? So if you say, okay, fine, I think what we're having now is hopeless, okay, and let's continue to be hopeless, then fine, let's all wait. Waiting for Godot, right? Nothing will happen, right? So, yeah, so if I really want it to be better, and the other person is not willing to change, then I can either sit there and suck my thumb, or I can choose to change. And it's a conscious effort on my part, because if I don't do it, then things might just spiral out of control. And I cannot expect my spouse to change, because why would he or she change?
So I'm going to give you a bit of a difficult question.
Yes.
What if I say I'm going to change, but then I change? I think one of the common things is I change, but unconsciously there's expectation. So I change and I'm expecting some results. And when I don't get the results, I either get discouraged or I get resentful. And then I stop. And then I say, but I tried what? And it didn't work,
And that is a very good, when we talk about perspectives. So if I change, I should just change and not expect my partner to change. So regardless of whether my spouse changes, I'm going to change. That's it.
And my question to that is, are you invested in being right, or are you invested in the relationship?
Yeah. It's all about the relationship, right?
Yeah.
It's not whether I'm right or I'm wrong. And we're not about criticizing the other partner. Or I say something bad about you, okay, it's my turn, I should say something bad. And it gets worse. So if the person says something bad about me, I say, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Okay, let's not go further. If we continue going further, then it goes on a slippery slope. So yeah, similar vein with this as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love, because what I'm hearing is generosity of spirit, where I'm not just changing just for the relationship, but for me. I think that's one of the most empowering, not just for the relationship, but if I change for me,
I'll be a better person.
Yes, it doesn't
We'll all be a better
matter
people,
whether,
right?
because relationship in reality takes time,
Yes.
right? But while it's happening there, hey, my change on how I feel about me, on my thoughts, my attitude to life, everything will shift, and I am the biggest benefactor of my decision to change. I think that's something that a lot of individuals don't see, because we are waiting for something on the outside to change, when actually the greatest reward is the internal locus of control that has expanded in our constant proactive action taking.
That's what change someone is about, right?
Yeah.
Making
Yes.
a proactive change. And I want to do something for the world regardless, right? Yes.
Yeah, regardless, right? Okay, wonderful. And now, Dr. Angela, I want to ask you, when we talk about conflict resolution, because in any relationship, is there any technique that we can exercise or use, when we agree to disagree?
I think for once, let's be clear about what our own conflict resolution style or conflict management style is. So for example, if me and Andrea are having a conflict, I'm the avoidance and she tends to be the aggressor. Okay?
It does.
I can imagine you be running away and she's chasing you.
Yeah, and then, the conflict will never ever resolve. So I think number one thing that all of us have to know is awareness. What type of conflict management style are we? What is that for our partner? And from there, let's work things out. Because without the awareness, we'll be constantly on each other's toes And or imagine if both of us are aggressor,
Wow.
then that will never
World War
end
III.
either. Okay, or even no, both of us are avoiders.
Won't talk about it.
Yes.
One day it's just over.
Yeah. So it's about really understanding how do we respond when it comes to conflict, and is that actually helpful? If it's not helpful, let's change it.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think again, it alludes to having a lot of communication about it, because from my upbringing, maybe I was reprimanded a lot.
Yeah.
And that's why I've learned how to keep quiet and not speak up for myself. So I may be battling my own demons. It's not that I'm trying to be difficult or I don't know, but it's a skill that I never learned. I never had the
Correct. And then, for example,
opportunity.
guys, they always think, I better shut up, because the more I say, the more angry my wife get. But on the end, the wife was like, why aren't you talking to me? Am I shouting to a wall?
Yeah. Ask you a question, not answering. Hello.
Yes. No, so it never ends. So, it's just about understanding our style and work it through.
And even calling for a timeout if
Yes.
need be, so that we can go recollect, anchor ourselves, and then come and talk level-headedly, because it never works when we're all like fight or flight mode and fighting, right? And
Or freezing. So
Yeah.
to me, it's fight, flight, and freeze.
Yes, yes, wonderful. And Andrea, so if I were to ask you, right, you mentioned mirror. Can you share more about this mirroring?
In terms of how how the couple mirrors each other. Yeah, we had like a lot of conversations before the panel. I think what happens is when we look at the other person and we see them doing something, and then we interpret it through our filters. So there's a lot of projection, like, oh, he's doing this or she's doing this because of something. So it's a little bit more on playing up the stories and how we project on others. But I think when it comes to conflict resolution, it's not about, like, you don't need to be like 100% self-aware, like you not to be like 100% woke. I get it, it's a growing journey. We're all like work in progress. And like to build on, say, the learning your conflict styles, it's also about like, what do you want to build in your couple bubble in that sense, maybe set some ground rules. When we quarrel, I'm really uncomfortable when you walk away, because it makes me feel like you're not listening to me. Oh, okay, I get it. So we agree this. Or let's agree when we quarrel, let's not bring up. Talk about it, set your ground rules, and what you want to add in the bubble. Like after that, whatever happens, we need to give each other a hug or something like that. Even it's very again technical, but it works because you discuss this before conflict happens. When there's the intensity of conflict, then you can bring it out, versus while you're calling them, I told you I wanted this, or I told you I wanted that, that kind of things. Like, set your boundaries and your ground rule. Of course, during conflict, sometimes we may forget that, we may kind of veer off that, we get so pissed off, or we say something that hurts the other person. Then, mistakes happen, even in these kind of things. So what is our do-over in that sense, if one person apologizes, oh yeah, I know we had this ground rule, but like, sorry, I was so pissed off and so angry that I forgot about that when we quarreled. It's also about being gracious to accept that as well, being able to say that. So does your relationship allow for this? But even if, of course, we're not going to quarrel to find out, but at least before conflict happens, or the intensity of it, when times are good, which is the same thing about sex. You don't talk about the issues of sex during sex. You talk about it when you're in a very calm, and not when the baby is screaming, not when like you are like really exhausted, or the guy just came back from work. Okay, I'm not saying that the woman stays at home, but I'm saying, for example, especially for men, when they're like, whoa, and then suddenly you have to switch. They can't do that like next second switch. So the minute they step in, then just now, yesterday we talked about sex and we didn't finish talking about it, and then like, I tell you, the poor guy, you will see him clamp,
Freeze.
Mm.
and then I go wash my car. I need to wash my car, or like, we need more milk in the house, huh? Yeah. Like suddenly you see and then you'll be like, you always walk away when I
You're
want to.
avoiding.
Yeah, I want to talk, but you always walk away. So how you see how it builds. When I say it like that, it sounds a little bit like over dramatic, and in some people are like giggling a bit, but it is exactly what happens. And when you break it down, you understand what happens during each step. You get it. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. Why you respond. So talk in time of peace, to prepare for when there's intensity.
And you're talking about triggers, right? Because, like, for example, if let's just say it's the husband who walks away, it could remind the wife of her dad, for example, if family origin, who used to walk out, whenever, and just disappeared from the family.
Yes.
So it could be a trigger or trauma. So
Correct.
yeah.
So these are things you can talk about. For me to be able to have a conversation with you, I need this. Then listen to what the other person needs to say.
I love how this session is talking about communication.
Yeah.
And I want to say this to our audience, right? It really doesn't matter where you are in your relationship, right? Whether it's really, really bad because you've been castrating your man or unknowingly, or whether, you know, you've been made to feel bad because he tells you you don't look good, right? But just know that for him, where he comes from is looks are important to him. That's all, right? And it's not a judgment. It's just what is his priority. And I think in understanding that, the reality is you can be the change for yourself today, right? Putting the marriage aside, for you, right? Be that change. And with that, I want to take some questions. One of which is this person: sexual fulfillment is high up for men. However, my husband has rather low sex drive. I'm worried and I don't bring it up because she's aware. He has other issues like unable to ejaculate in me, you know. So I really don't know where to seek help. And there's not much information online. Is
That's
it
true.
hormonal, you know, or
I
something
think
else?
it's way more than that.
Yeah.
So we don't know because there's so many question marks. It could be ejaculation issues medically, it could be an erection issue medically, or it can be entirely psychological. So we don't know whether this low sex drive was probably maybe in the last relationship, he was shamed a lot by his ex-girlfriend, for example, and that could end up in him losing all confidence in sex right now. You see, so there are so many things that we don't know. And then I guess, like what I think the emphasis talk about is communication. If we do not communicate, we never know where to start solving this problem.
And would I be right to say that maybe the first person to communicate with is with the partner?
Yeah.
Right. It's just to say, hey, this is something that I've been afraid to talk about, to bring up, to create that vulnerability, that space to say, I'm scared to talk about it, and that's why I haven't been talking about it for so long. But it matters enough for me to take a risk to bridge it with you because I want to do something. Yeah.
So like when I saw the question, I'm reading off the screens. If the people are like, why are they like reading off one
No,
corner,
it's
right?
fine. Yeah.
So when I saw the question, no, in case the people, like the audience in the camera, are wondering why our eyes shifting left and right. You know, when we from the whole question, the front part, there is one portion that the couple needs to work at in terms of how do we talk about sex and intimacy. Okay, so there's that portion, that piece that, you know, it's a skill set that we have to learn, and that's part of the question. The other part, like Angela said, that it could be medically or psychological. Honestly, there are many possibilities. So you can't just do a blanket statement. The internet doesn't always have accurate information, even
Correct.
for women's stuff. So that one I have to be very clear, because I've always had clients come to me and they tell me like, I heard from the internet this, and I can tell you nothing can be further from the truth. But it does sound, I mean, and I don't want to speculate, but it does sound a little bit more psychological. And I will ask questions like, is he able to ejaculate elsewhere? Is he able to get erect in other times, sorry? Is he able to ejaculate in other parts? Like he can ejaculate externally, cannot ejaculate internally, things like that. You know, what is his association with children, with getting pregnant, for his spouse getting pregnant? What is his relationship with sex as well? Whether that's something that needs to be worked through as well. And I will also look at, in terms of, depends on how long this has built up, with the wife as well, what is going on with her relationship with sex, and the intimacy in the relationship. So there's a lot to unpack here. Honestly, whether can it be hormonal or not is also not the first thing I will usually look at. Even when a woman is, I've like premenopausal, I have menopausal coming to me, the first thing I don't go is like, oh, because you're hormonal, that's why like that. Because with sex, there's a lot of stuff that's packed.
A lot of layers.
Yeah, and a huge part is psychological, below the physical and the medical. So there's definitely that part to work with. It has to work with that. If not, you cannot deal with the hormonal impact.
I wanted to address the other psychological issues. I actually, the first thing that I got when I first read the question is the husband might have some issues. It could be a family of origin issue. It could be, I read the word shame actually quite a bit into that as well. It could be how perceptions of sex are from the family of origin. Was sex seem to be seen as a shameful thing, as a dirty thing? So I mean, some of the other things that actually are into that. That's like what both of you have brought up as well.
Actually, once you said that, sorry, I need to build on that. Once you said that, and I'm gonna, I mean, like that's what coaches do, okay. So, I'm gonna be quite direct. it may also even be to the point where maybe the guy's just not aroused by his partner. There might be something in there, and in working in that is important. But both parties have to
Have to own
understand
it.
they have to understand that there may be these things that come up, and you have to be big enough a person to be able to work through these things together. So it's a whole range. I'm not saying it's any of that we mentioned, because like I said, there's so much stuff unpacked there. I saw one more point, is like, who exactly do we see for this? So usually sex coaches or sex therapists, kind of like the work that we do. Sorry, I'm more familiar with, because I knew her before the panel.
No, but
So you
it's
can let me know
wonderful
if
because
you
at the end, right, we will be giving prizes sponsored by each of my panelists. So yeah, you would potentially have a consult session to, if this is something that you want to take on offline. Yeah. But in wrapping this up, I think it's been a very insightful session as we look at how intimacy is. So is there any last tip you want to leave our audience with starting with you, Mark? When we talk about sex and intimacy.
I'll say first thing first is to know the expectations. Yeah, know what you expect, know what the partner expects. I think, to be honest and to be open from there, that's what I would say.
Expectations. Get present to our own expectations and
Yes.
our partners. Wonderful. And Dr. Angela?
I would say if you're struggling with figuring out what actually works in the relationship and want to work, it's actually pretty okay to find a third party to work out with you. It can be your best friend that both of you trust. Cannot be one person's best friends, because you'll be biased.
Then biased already, right?
Yeah, because when a third party points of view then comes and it is helpful. And then if you're going to choose a counselor, a therapist, or whatever, it's not just about the qualification, but always remember to do a chemistry call and see whether you and the person, the vibes fits, is the value fits. Because if it doesn't, no matter how qualified the person is, it wouldn't work out well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So third party, involve a mediator in that. And Andrea?
I would say really look at what are you putting into your relationship, not what you are demanding the other person put in. Really, what are you putting in the relationship, and what do you all want to build together? If you realize that any of your actions, your conversations, or even your thoughts are putting you on different sides of the team, where you're taking score, or where you're competing with each other, or where you're against each other on different sides of the
The
boat,
line.
court, different sides of the court, then you know that you're not playing the same game together. Whatever you do, you want to be on the same team. So how do you change your decisions, choose new direction, just so that you can be together on the same team?
Wonderful. I love the three different perspectives: expectations, mediator, and be on the same side instead of clashing, right? So I think we started with this, and let's conclude with, I think, to ask ourselves first, as you watch this, what does sex mean to you? Right? Like, write down the list. Number two, what does intimacy mean to you? And then not just with your list, go to your partner, have them write their own list and talk about it. I think that would be a very powerful starting point to begin to bridge, because I think very often in fast-paced Singapore, we assume so much that it makes an ass of you and me, literally, where to me sex means this and this and this, and it's all just miscommunication or not being communicated. So I trust you've had a wonderful session. Do invite your friends to watch the recording of this on our momspace.asia Facebook page. Until then, you have a wonderful start to the rest of your weekend. And next week, we will be continuing the family segment. So do sign up for the Zoom link. Join us from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 1 p.m. And with that, I leave you to get your prizes from a very beautiful Use Me. Bye.